Hello, Facebook family. Talking about feminine power and its true value. And there's this upsurgence of people talking about what toxic masculinity is. And there's also toxic femininity. And there's something that we as women have been taught to use to our advantage. And unfortunately, that is our vulnerability and our victimhood. And women are taught to use this as a form of power. And so, how do we undo this? And how do we still maintain our power? What is feminine power? The feminine is soft. The feminine is vulnerable, yielding, receptive, open. And those aren't what we think of when we think of power. We think of the penetrating force, the controlling one, the one that makes things happen. And so, to take a step back and approach life from the perspective of the woman, and for men, that's the feminine inside of each of us. That's paying more attention to subtlety. And it's kind of like, for me, I feel like this subtlety has been beaten out of me almost. Like when I was younger, I was so connected to this part of myself that was like alive and awake, and I could hear every sound and I could smell everything, and I was just like constantly exploring life around me. And something happened where I was ridiculed for that. I was shamed for that. And the more that I could feel, the more that I could be hurt. And I recognized that as something that was actually a weakness and not a part of my strength. And so the value of feminine power in creating balance in what the world is seeing right now, which is so out of balance, the way that we're living so far from the earth, so disconnected from the natural cycles of nature, of listening to our bodies, the rhythm of our bodies, of actually like waking up when the sun comes up, going to sleep and turning off the lights when the sun goes down, and how that affects our internal rhythms. That is being connected to the feminine. And women aren't taught how to be powerful as women. We're taught how to compete with men in power. We're taught that women can do it too. Women can wear our pantsuits and make the money and do the thing and, be at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. And that's great that we have that capacity. And yet there's something that we're missing. And when I think about that thing that we're missing, it makes me really sad, because I realize how much myself I've let this important part of me just slip away. And this really was causing me to feel exhausted all the time. Before I started this work, reclaiming my feminine sensual power and everything that means, it might sound like a catchphrase nowadays with so many people doing this work. It's so beautiful, but honestly, what it really means to reclaim this piece of ourselves, of myself. What it meant for me was to remember how to listen to my body and to understand that this thing that I was taught as a child, as a teenager, the sexual energy that awakens in all of us when we're growing up, I was taught that it was going to be used against me. And I was taught that it was not the way that a woman should feel her power, and not the way that a woman should walk through the world carrying this sexual energy. And so it kind of turned into awkwardness. It was like I had so much inside me, I didn't know what to do with it. And so it turned into kind of me being against myself. And it felt like me being against my own flow of energy that was moving through my body. And when I started waking this up again through yoga and tantric breathwork practices, I was lucky to start a yoga practice at the age of 15. And this helped me feel this thing in my body that was like always there and just behind the surface, just behind my fear of being too much, just behind my fear of being too alive. And what would they think? Would they try to steal some of my light if they could feel it? If they could see it in me, would they try to, beat me down, basically? And in reclaiming that, I went from basically being chronic fatigue in my 20s. I had chronic fatigue in my 20s. I didn't want to leave my house. I was very antisocial. I'm still kind of like an extroverted introvert. But when I was younger, I just was so inside myself. I felt so contracted because like the truest, most real part of me was being withheld. And the part of me that made me feel most alive, I was taught was wrong. Because at that point, I didn't know how to separate sexual energy from aliveness. And like my sexual energy was kind of kept down there around my sex organs, and it was restricted from being allowed to live in my body and shine through my eyes in my daily experience of life. And what's shifted is I now understand sexual energy as being something that's one of the most potent, powerful, magnetic, illuminating qualities of all of us. And the way that I feel it in myself is this like pulse, this throb of light moving through me. And yeah, I could choose to use that for sex. Sometimes I do, and that's great. I love sex. Who doesn't like sex? I mean, sex is amazing. And, you know, developing a certain amount of, I guess, maturity with it. Maturity to choose how you use it so that it's not using you. And that's something that I didn't have when I was a child. I didn't have that maturity to understand that I actually had a choice with what I felt in my body. Just like now, I have a choice when I feel an emotion. I can react and lash out if I feel anger, or I can hold it in. And neither of the two of those are ultimately beneficial. You know, as I've grown and matured, I learned that anger is actually a really potent tool. And it's telling you something that needs to be paid attention to. Either your own patterns or somebody else in your life is crossing a line. And anger has helped me understand how to develop boundaries for myself. And so a lot of us don't actually understand that we have the power and the potential to create our lives by how we respond to our internal environments, how we respond to the energy that we feel moving through us, whether it's emotional energy, thought energy, sexual energy, physical, however that manifests. And because of that, a lot of this repression that we have, it turns sexual energy into anxiety. Or if we learn to effectively repress our sexual energy, it turns into depression, chronic fatigue like I experienced, stagnation in our very life force. And I see this again and again with women in this concept of toxic femininity versus toxic masculinity. Whereas the masculine is encouraged to be overtly powerful and maybe like just always want sex and always be ready for adventure and just like, you know, really type A, basically. That's like the masculine drive. Women are encouraged to be docile, and we're encouraged to not have a mind of our own, to not speak up, to not have our own desires, to not make shit happen. Pardon my language. But don't pardon my language. Fuck it. It's Facebook Live. You're getting it real. And sometimes I talk like a pirate, so if I offend you, that's that. So women are taught to not step into their power. And I've had so many women that I work with, coaching one-on-one, who tell me that they're actually terrified to wake up their sexual energy because they ask, what would happen if I actually let that move through me? What would happen if I actually let myself feel all that energy? I'm scared to feel my power, because what if I was insatiable? What if this thing that I felt running through me drew in energy that I didn't want, that I didn't want? What if I'm just like going to be leaking my sexual energy everywhere, and people are going to see me as this kind of woman, and people aren't going to take me seriously? There's a list of fears that women have around embodying their sexuality, and a lot of it comes from the fear that what we feel inside is actually too much. What we feel inside is actually not welcome in this world, because we haven't been taught how to hold it as a source of power. We've taught to use it to have power over other people, which is toxic femininity. When men or women, anybody, when somebody uses their God-given power to manipulate other people, that is when a natural expression of life turns into something potentially toxic. So if the only way that I know how to use my beauty, my sensuality, my freedom is to draw somebody else in, is to make some kind of statement that, an ego statement that makes me feel good about myself. And I'm doing it for the other person. I'm doing it so that I get likes on Facebook and followers on Instagram. Then I'm actually not doing it for myself. And I'm not feeding the source of my own life. I'm feeding the attention. I'm feeding, so to speak, the hungry ghost syndrome. And when you shine a light, of course, you can either lift other people up and inspire other people, or you can, use it for your own personal power advantage. And in order to feel safe, in order to be safe with sexual energy as a woman, as a man, as a transgender, as a human being on this planet at this time, in order to be safe, we have to know how to hold the power of that energy. And it's more powerful than we have even given it credit for. Sex it's our ability as humans to create life. And taking away any shame from our sexual expression is so important in knowing how to hold it in a way that is actually healing to ourselves and to other people, so that when I walk in a room, I want to be a beacon of light for every woman in that room, for every man in that room, for every person around me, so that they can, not that I need to make a point, but that my acceptance of my love for God, of my love for life, of my love for myself, my love for my own heart, and my love for the experience of life that I feel at every moment moving through me. That experience is communicated in the way that I carry myself, because that's the only way that I believe that we can actually be in right relationship with life, is to let it move through you, to let it move us, to let it dance us and sing through us. And to me, that's like true feminine power, is listening and letting ourselves be moved. And men can have this power. It's the part of you that knows how to listen to subtlety and knows how to respond to beauty. And so many of us have cut ourselves off from this experience of beauty, this experience of actually taking life in. And we've stopped ourselves from our ability to be affected by what makes life the most beautiful. And this is why I believe so many people in our culture are on antidepressants, addicted to a whole list of things, because we've actually lost our ability to feel life. And yes, that relates to your sexual energy, because, sensuality is about being alive in the senses. It's about feeling. It's about actually living through the experience of the present moment in mindful connection to what your senses are telling you in any given moment. Connection to your intuition. Connection to your inner sense of feeling, and your ability to let go in any moment enough to be fully penetrated by the experience that life wants to give you. And staying stuck in our minds might seem safe, and it's so unfulfilling. I'd rather be fulfilled and, broken at times by the bigness of my experience of life than I would be unfulfilled and staying safe, just kind of peeking over that wall. So I think, I know actually for myself that the best way that I can live is to be in worship at all times, in bhakti at all times, and letting myself actually feel the joy and the beauty of life. I guess that's it. Thank y'all for listening. Peace out. Mwah.